Arizona PBS is proud to support Indian Country Today. For 6 decades, we've provided television programs and now digital content. But we go beyond that, sending outreach teams across Arizona, offering workshops in language and literacy, family engagement and community outreach, and supporting tribal communities with early learning and school readiness resources. Join us at azpbs.org.
This is Indian Country Today.
Esquili, yes, thank you for joining us. I'm Patty Thalahungva. Fires continue to threaten tribal lands in the Pacific Northwest. Flames are spreading into already dry tribal territories. Leaders are struggling to preserve traditional hunting and fishing lands in this historic drought. At least 2 tribes have declared states of emergency amid the devastation. According to the National Interagency Fire Center, there are 70 fires burning in Oregon, California, and Washington. Troy Hockaday Sr. is a council member for the Karuk tribe located in northwestern California. He says about 40 square miles of the tribe's original territory, which they use for ceremonies and hunting, is closed off to them right now. The Klamath tribes in Chilochin, Oregon, are concerned because the fires are burning their ancestral territory as well. But leaders say so far, no homes or people are in the path of danger. And in north central Washington, the Colville tribes are ordering some of its citizens to evacuate. There are 5 fires burning in that area. The largest blaze is affecting 9,000 tribal citizens. Thousands of Native Americans are in Las Vegas for the Reservation Economic Summit, hoping to make some business deals. And as Aaliyah Chavez reports, that includes dozens of individual vendors who are selling art, beauty products, and other items.
There are booth spaces for 200 economic development organizations and 40 for arts and crafts. After COVID started, small business owners and artisans were forced to find new ways to make money. Stacia Morfin is the owner of an all-female-owned business in Idaho. It is a tourism company and a gift shop. After the pandemic paused travel, she was spurred to help people in her community by buying their crafts and reselling them to others.
This is an example of one of my artists. Their name is Toshin Steph, and this is their way of life.
Her business reaches beyond the borders of her tribal nation.
So we work with Native tribes all over North America. And it's beautiful because we were really able to help them generate revenues to feed their family, to raise their families, to inspire more cultural values and authenticity within their own families during the hardest time of their lives, during a pandemic.
RES is a conference promoting economic development in Indian country. For business owners like Aseki LaFrance Chacher, it provides her the opportunity to connect with each other, collaborate, and create jobs.
As our indigenous way of life is always to help. So just implementing what I have been raised with into my business and indigenizing the industry that I'm in, we already have the blueprint. We just got to move with it.
The trade show ends on Thursday. Many vendors hope it will be the economic boost they expect.
Australia's University of Tasmania is introducing Indigenous perspectives into its teaching. The students are hearing from speakers whose ancestors were the first people to call Tasmania home, and they also get to share in a traditional meal like mutton bird. They're being invited into a place that most non-Indigenous people have never been invited to. The culture camp takes place in Risdon Cove, where the first known killings of Aboriginal people by British colonists happened in Tasmania. Nala Mansell, who is Palawa, hopes by sharing her history and culture, students will become allies to the Indigenous people of Tasmania.
To have people coming up and asking what they can do to solve these sort of issues and to work with the Aboriginal community, and I think that's what it's all about.
Around 400 students are enrolled in the course this year. A young Native actor is making a big splash in Hollywood. Isaac Arianes is the youngest Native American to be nominated for a Daytime Emmy. Arianes is Hopi from the village of Hotvilla. The 16-year-old competed in the category of Outstanding Younger Performer in a Daytime Fiction Program. He received his Emmy nod for playing Ruben Reyna in the Apple TV series Ghost Rider. Arianes says he wants to use his newfound influence to help others find their own success.
I want to be able to reach out to people that are weeping, or the people that genuinely are hurting, and then the people that don't know what they're going to do with their life, and me, whether it's me explaining, hey, you don't have to be an influencer to feel successful.
And though he didn't win the big prize this year, Isaac says he's very honored to be nominated. To read more about him, visit IndianCountryToday.com and search for the headline, Meet the First Native Daytime Youth Emmy Nominee, Isaac Arianes. And those are the headlines from Indian Country Today. I'm Patty Thalahungva. When we come back, we'll take you to Las Vegas, where the National Indian Gaming Association Conference is underway.
We're in Las Vegas this week, and there are two major conferences going on. One is the National Indian Gaming Association. Ernie Stevens is the chairman of NIGA. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
So NIGA really got hit when this pandemic started because your conference was about to start, and that's when everything fell out.
Yep. Yeah, it's you know, the biggest thing I think about is just looking forward. What we've been through the last 2 years, or nearly 2 years, is just, it's you know, there's all kinds of stories. Some are emotional, some are frustrated, and some are just flat out angry, you know. But you know, we're going forward today, and here at Vegas is a giant step forward for us. But yeah, we're ready. We were ready to roll. Literally, I think it was like 2 weeks, you know. And when I informed the executive board of the National Indian Gaming Association, as we were doing that, the governor shut down the state. That's what the timing was. Now, I don't know if that was lucky timing, or if I took a little too long to cancel that postpone that conference. But here we are. This is it. This is what we got, and we're excited about it.
Well, tribes really were out front and did a lot of things that took states a lot longer to do, and as a result, there was different impacts. And one of the things we're seeing now is people are really excited to get back and to do something together, and this represents that.
Yeah, you know, I'll be fair with the states, you know, that we have to be friends and we have to work together, and a lot of us have different kinds of agreements with the states. So whether we're following them or they're following us, the fact of the matter is we had to react, and we had to do something to keep our families, our communities, and our customers safe, and that's what we did. We reacted immediately. And you know, I think, Mark, the biggest thing to understand as we talk today is those tribal leaders, the hit they took, those regulators, those gaming professionals, the things, the responsibility they have, especially the leadership. You know, a lot of people weren't too patient with it when they got to go home from work. When their unemployment, they say that was good. I don't think there's anything good about unemployment, but they say that the bonuses helped them. Sure, that's what they were there for. But nothing is good about going home when you've been someplace 10 years, 20 years, some people 30 plus years went home, and then trying to understand how to come back out of this. Indian gaming has done strong in the comeback, but you can't replace something when you just shut it down. You can't just find the money to rehire people or put people back to work, rebudget those positions, so you have to rank them, and that's the tribal leader's job. That's what they sign up for. But I really, really support them because they went through heck in trying to keep their people, their communities safe, and keep their economy going forward. And you know, here we are. It's still a lot of work to do. I think they made good decisions because there's a lot of lives, I believe, were saved by the response of the tribes and the communities, and especially the tribal leaders.
Two large trends that impact Indian country, like everybody, is the harder it is to hire people, and the second is the rise of inflation. What do your members saying about those two things?
Well, you know, I don't know, really we had that real deep discussion, you know, because really this is our first time getting around the table. And so we've been very active on the Zoom and all these different kinds. I don't even know what they call them. There's some new technology every day. So there's a lot of good things that have happened. The Washington Redskins went away during this time. So I think and the communication between the tribes, the state, and local municipalities had to be good. We didn't have any choice. So I think those are some of the things that we're going to continue to build upon. But the bottom line on this thing is we work closely with those states and those governments, and we saved lives, but we did it as sovereign governments, and we did it the way we felt we needed to do it. And I believe that we really did it in a way that's respected by those governments around us.
What excites you the most about bringing people together this week?
Oh, once we level off, today is kind of my wife of 42 years is here with me, and we may do some shopping or something, but as long as she's nearby, that's the exciting part, to bring my wife to work. She's the first lady, and she helps me, she stands by my side. But I think that coming down the hallway just to find you, us Indians have a funny way of communicating, and we just find each other, and we work our way through this. We make spontaneous decisions. But I think that I start running into people. And my father, your friend, Ernie Stevens Sr., he told me when I wanted to run for NCAI first vice president 24 years ago, he said, I'm that guy that checked to see those people who were in their seats every NCAI meeting. I'm that guy that's noticed the guys who were in the social environment too much in those days. He said, so if you want to go to work, you want to do this, he said, if you want to work for NCAI, you got to work morning, noon, and night. And you got to have time for everybody. And so that's what I do. I stop and say hello. My team is always saying, come on, keep it moving. But I got to help everybody. I got to talk to everybody. That's my job. It's the most exciting thing to know that I'm a second generation. My father, he carved the path with no cell phones and no Zoom and none of this stuff, So I think that's the most important thing for me, is being in contact. And I've got my mask. And I try to be social distance, but sometimes, people get a little too close. So what I do is I try to drop the shoulder, but I can't help but hug them. But I'm trying not to, but I'm violating that rule because what do you say? No, we can't have a hug. So we're excited and we're energetic. And I think that's the most important thing to me, to be able to see Indians, to be able to at least, I try to stay with the fist bump if I can. We're doing a little handshaking. Most of us are trying to wear our mask, and I think we're getting better. It's a little bit slower, but I think everybody understands in order for us to get better, we have to follow the rules and try to be safe and distance. So I think that kind of hinders it, but I tell you, when you see them, it's almost like going back in time when you even seeing you coming down the hallway, It said, hey, we're there. As long as we're careful, as long as we're safe. It's nice to get the people around the table. That's my favorite thing. My father said that you get the people around the table, and the Indians always figure it out, always. And that's always been my policy. That I may be a figurehead, but the role I have as a figurehead is to bring the tribes, the leadership together, so they can figure out what we need to do, and then I get my marching orders from them. So I'm excited about us seeing the leadership. I'm nervous too. It's really, we do this all the time for years. I ran for first vice president in 1995. I was 34 years old. And then these conferences and trade shows and legislative summits, we've all done this. And very few people in this world have done it more than me. That might be you. So I'm not going to call you an old man, but you've seen this. That's the most exciting part, to see these leaders in the hallway, to be able to, and I didn't even start it yet, but you know what? I'm going to tell them. I'm going to tell them to keep your mask on. I'm going to tell them to be careful and control your social environment, because we have a little ways to go, because we can't afford to. That's my main thing, Mark. The frustrating part for me is that those people put 30 years in for their tribe, right, and they can't go back to work. And those leadership that have to tell them that, So we need to find places for them, because if you've been around that long, we got a place for you. We just got to get our budgets to grow and get our people back in place.
Since you mentioned your father, let me talk about him a little bit. He was in charge of economic development during the Nixon administration, and there was a lot going on at that time. It was the beginning of self-determination. And he was an innovator, and gaming is very innovative. There's so much going on in that area.
Yeah, well, Dad was just ahead of his time. And so people thought he was radical. Some people thought maybe he's a little out there, But everything that he talked about, whether it was tobacco or Indian civil rights, with what is the general welfare exclusion? That was such a battle for us. And a lot of people said, well, it's not going to happen, at least not this year. But I got to go back to that nursing home. My dad don't even talk much, but he looked me in my eye. And if I had to go back and tell him we lost that fight, that would be one of the most devastating defeats of my life. So when we got that, we went with Senator Campbell and a few other of our friends and knew we were going to make it, knew we were going to save something that's totally unjust to the tribes. And now the tribes are being able to move forward with millions of dollars that they have, not individually, but overall, it is millions that we can now use for our elders, for our education, for our health and welfare. Those are the kind of things that I can go back and look Ernie in the eye and say, Dad, I carried the torch this far. And now I'll hand the next one to the vice chairman of Oneida, my oldest son, Brandon, and those young leaders. It's just amazing. And so we just, carrying the torch is my thing. And I one day at a time, I want to do it well, but has some big shoes to fill. You know better than I do what kind of shoes I got to fill in Ernie Stevens Sr. He was just absolutely iconic. But when he retired from Washington, and came home, I wanted a fast car, and I want this lady that I've been hanging around with for 42 years, I wanted to hang with her. So, but when I got involved in economic development and politics and gaming, he was always the first one. And if we didn't know what to do, he said, we're gonna get something. That was his thing. It was, if you feed me, we'll figure it out. That's what my daddy was. He was not a rocket scientist, he was a worker. Thank you for bringing him up.
I'm so glad to have this conversation. What's the takeaway for this week? The last question.
Takeaway. I think that if we're careful and we're safe and we work hard like my father, my daddy, the only one that demands hard work, all these tribal leaders do. Yeah. And so we get the leader's voice out there, we can be heard and we can plan our next step and let folks know that Indian country didn't go any place. We just used these machines during the pandemic. And we'll continue to use those machines. We found some good technology. But we're here, we're on the front line, we're ready to go to work. And guess what, Las Vegas? We Indians love Las Vegas. We're all over the place here. But Indian gaming, pre-pandemic, was a touch above the overall mainstream gaming, Vegas included. So we're up there. And the last thing I'll say is we want to get our people back to when the pandemic hit, we were the 11th highest employer with Walmart and all these guys. We were the 11th highest employer in the country. That's where we want to get back to.
Ernie Stevens Jr., thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
And we'll be right back. I'm Mark Trahant, Indian Country Today. We're at the Reservation Economic Summit here in Las Vegas. Today we're talking with Bryan Van Stippen, and he runs the National Indian Carbon Coalition. Tell us about that.
Well, thanks for having me today. So the National Indian Carbon Coalition is made up by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation as well as the Intertribal Agricultural Council. Those two organizations came together about 8 years ago because there was a lot of development on carbon sequestration projects occurring in Indian country, most of them on the California cap and trade market. And we started to realize that there was not enough education and knowledge base for tribes as they were trying to get courted to enter into these projects. So the National Indian Carbon Coalition was created in order to help educate and communicate what the implementation of carbon sequestration projects on tribal lands entailed.
Well, let's start and pretend that we're journalists and so we don't know anything. And what would be carbon sequestration in kind of a primer?
So some of the things that we try to work on is really strongly as our messaging and ensuring that we're not using too many technical details. So we try to avoid greenhouse gas emissions and carbon dioxide, and we really want to focus specifically on the natural resources that a tribal nation owns. So we talk specifically about carbon credits and what a carbon credit entails. A carbon credit is made up of 1 metric ton of carbon dioxide that is going to be stored in a natural resource that a tribe may own on their lands, whether it be trees or grassland or grazing land, and other types of opportunities that a tribal nation may have with their natural resources. And so we look at that and we can develop a feasibility study to determine how much carbon can actually be sequestered within those natural resources on tribal lands. So I work with an outside private developer that helps me come up with those calculations. We present that information to the tribe if there's interest at no cost to the tribe. So I've received federal funding in order to go out in Indian country and work with tribes to develop this information. And then we give it to the tribe to say, this is how much carbon you sequester, and this is how much revenue can be generated from that project on your tribal lands. And then depending on whether or not it's economically viable, we would then move forward with the actual development of a carbon sequestration project.
And I think that's one of the main takeaways for an audience is that in many cases, these are hugely profitable ventures.
It really depends on the natural resources. So there are some tribes that I'm working with currently that they're not that great economic drivers, but because they are implementing these practices on their tribal lands, it's still an additional revenue stream. So it makes a lot of sense for those tribal nations. Obviously, some of the things that we've seen in the industry currently have been large forest-based tribes that have entered into these projects, and they are large economic drivers, especially after we've seen with the pandemic and tribes being affected by their revenue streams from gaming and hospitality being shut down. We are now seeing an interest by tribal nations to look at for the protection and preservation of their natural resources by implementing these projects on their tribal lands. And so it's been a very good last few years for the National Indian Carbon Coalition as the interest on how to diversify your economy for these tribal nations has been developed in the last couple of years.
The other thing that is kind of a takeaway from this is it seems like this is how you become part of a solution instead of just throwing up your hands and say climate change is too big to deal with. They're actually really building blocks you can do.
Correct, and that's one of the terminology that I like to use is that this is one of the tools in the toolkit. This isn't the end-all be-all solution for addressing climate change on your tribal lands, but we have to start somewhere, and this is a starting point. My intent, hopefully, is that if I work with a tribal nation, that they would derive revenue from the project by entering into this carbon sequestration project and then do future carbon sequestration projects or other renewable energy projects on their tribal lands. So for instance, I'm working with the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians in Cloclay, Minnesota. We are developing a carbon sequestration project on about 8,000 acres of land. It's going to generate around $5 million in revenue, and then we want to take that revenue and reacquire attritional territory within their exterior boundaries of their reservation and try to develop more renewable energy projects on their tribal lands. They already have a solar project, they have a woody biomass project that they're doing, they've done a large-scale energy efficiency project with their tribal buildings to reduce their energy consumption, and we know that that tribe can do more. They are technically, after we did the feasibility study on the carbon sequestration project, at a net zero tribe currently, and they were shooting for 2030 under the Kyoto Protocol to be a net zero tribe, and they're currently right there at this point in time.
That's extraordinary. One of the other things I think is interesting is that sometimes it's about developing natural resources, carbon low impact, but in other cases it's not doing anything that can be the carbon benefit.
That's part of it, and we have a lot of discussion right now in the industry about the question of additionality. Are we doing additional things to the land base to ensure that we're sequestering carbon and that those practices are going to be maintained for a long period of time? And that's some of the things that has been a little bit of a hurdle at this point because the industry is currently changing. There's a lot of interest on ensuring that there's a development of high quality carbon credits. There are now organizations that are analyzing projects to ensure that they're high quality projects. And the good thing to me is that a lot of the socially responsible organizations are interested in purchasing high quality credits, and we see that coming out of Indian country. That's one of the reasons why I'm promoting these types of projects to tribal nations. I believe that tribes can be leaders in this industry, and we can guide the industry for the rest of the private landowners that are trying to develop these high quality credits to ensure that the practices that we have on those lands are actually being conducted and sequestering carbon for the long term to protect our 7 generations of children that we're looking for in the future.
In addition to the big global issues, one other that might be important to talk about is the opportunities for young people to build careers. How is that changing?
So that is another one of the elements that we want to work on at the National Indian Carbon Coalition that we strongly promote. There are some individuals that, for tribes that have developed projects, for instance, a gentleman I met, he started off as an intern helping develop and measure the carbon with one of the organizations on the feasibility, and now he's managing the projects on the other end and has built a career in this industry. And so we know that there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of educational opportunities for tribal youth to be involved in this industry, as well as grow and maintain for other opportunities such as soil scientists, tribal nation foresters. There's a plethora of job opportunities that tribes just don't have a lot of knowledge about, and that's one of the other opportunities that I see in this industry, is helping educate the tribe and the youth on these opportunities to build careers and not just jobs.
Is there a basic skill set that's needed?
An interest in environmental issues, that's about what I would look for. There's a lot of youth that are right now entering into environmental sciences and getting them progressed forward enough to start looking at this type of an industry in order to get a basic understanding so that they can help develop policy for the future. So that's some of the things that we're strongly encouraging the youth to look for, is policy development, so that, again, we see tribes as a leader in this industry and we're driving and moving forward as a tribal nation as a whole.
Bryan Van Stippen, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time today.
And that does it for this edition of Indian Country Today. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Your life is precious. I'm Patty Thalohungva. Join us again tomorrow for more from Las Vegas.
Take a stand just because you know you can. Oh, you got to run, you got to run.
This is Indian Country Today.